All right, guys. So today I'm going to be ranking the NFL teams that did not make the playoffs last year based on how likely they are to make the playoffs this year. Now, the tiers are pretty self explanatory, so let's just get into it. Now, the Bears, I know a lot of people are predicting them to be a really good team, but I think Caleb Williams will need a little bit of time to settle in, so I'm not going to count them out, but I don't think it's very likely that they do make the playoffs. I think that NFC North division with the Lions and Packers is pretty good. I actually think the Vikings could be solid too. So I just have to say that's possible, but I don't think it's very likely that they do. They'll probably finish with 6, 7 wins, but I'm just not going to count them in to make the playoffs. Now I think the Bengals is probably the easiest team on this list. You get Burrow back, and when healthy last year, obviously he played sometime injured, but when healthy last year, he did look really good. So we'll put the Bengals in most likely where they should be. Now, the Cardinals, I wouldn't count them out. I just don't think that it's like most likely, like how it is with the Bengals. I think that they're going to be a very interesting team, and I'm going to put them in that I wouldn't count them out, but it's not most likely that they do. I just think that, Kyler should be fully healthy. Obviously, he wasn't bad last year and he was mostly healthy. You get another elite target, really the first elite target. I can't name who else they had last year. But obviously they did, well, Hollywood Brown they had, but they did move on from him. So I wouldn't count them out, but I just don't think that it's very likely that they do it. Well, I wouldn't say that. It's just not like the Bengals. How I think the Bengals might actually be a lock for the playoffs next year out of all the teams that didn't make it. Now, the Broncos, I'm actually, we have a great O line. I think a lot of people are actually still sleeping on the Broncos, even after 8 wins last year, and the team is arguably, at least on the offense, better this year. But I wouldn't count them out. I don't think that it's super likely. It's not like the Bengals, but people act like we had a 5 win year last year, and that's just not the case. But I'm going to put the Broncos there because I think that the receiver group is good. It might actually be slightly improved from last year. Obviously, losing Judy, I don't see as a big thing. And getting Josh Reynolds, he could actually be a little better than Judy, and also drafting Troy Franklin. And I think the defense made some additions that are going to help. Obviously, the huge subtraction in Justin Simmons. But I just wouldn't count the Broncos out this year like a lot of people do. Now, the Chargers, this is every team's or every fan's favorite team to put super high, saying that, oh, this is the year they make the playoffs. And actually, I think it's more likely this year that they do than the past years. I've never been on the huge Charger hype train that they get every offseason since having Herbert. But honestly, I think that this is the year that they are most likely to make it into the playoffs. I think that the run game, trying to build their foundation off of that, is going to be a good thing. And I know that Quentin Johnston is like one of their top receivers, but I think he had a bad rookie year. But I still don't think we should count him out as being a good receiver in the league. They also drafted Lad McConkey in the second round, who some people thought could go first, but he's probably going to be solid. Obviously, we'll still have to see how it plays out. But I just think that, they're not a team you want to count out, but I just think that you can't be too high on them. Now the Falcons, I'd probably put them in the middle if they wouldn't count them out in most likely tier, but we're gonna put them up here. Apparently, Kirk Cousins is healthy. Their offense is pretty solid, and obviously having Desmond Ritter and Taylor Heineke last year didn't help. I think it was Mariota the year before last, but maybe Kyle Pitts will finally put it together. They had a solid offseason, and I just think that they can really put it together this year. Obviously, you have a better QB. Maybe that will unlock Kyle Pitts finally, who he's put up yards so far. Just his touchdowns have lacked and stuff like that. But I really do think that the Falcons have a good chance. They're probably the most likely, at least on the NFC side. But moving on, we have the Giants. I just I don't see it. I think that their offense is still very bad. well, not very bad, but you lose Saquon, who is a pretty decent piece of that offense, and Devin Singletary is your replacement, who just definitely is not the same caliber as Saquon. Your receiver core at least looks better. You draft the tight end. I believe they drafted Benson, or it was Johnson out of Penn State. Actually, I think that was it. But you know, they made some additions, but I just don't think. I think they're very well in the same tier as the Bears. I just don't think this is going to be the Giants here. I still think the defense is kind of weak, and I got flamed for that take, but I just think that the Giants are just going to be. They're going to be a little better than last year, but they're still just going to be mediocre. Moving to the Jags, I'd put them in the most likely tier as well. I think that, they were just one win out last year, and Trevor Lawrence down the stretch of the last 4 to 6 games was battling injuries, and he actually missed a couple. But I think that it's likely that the Jags, very likely that the Jags are going to make the playoffs this year, and I'd be excited to see them in it. Obviously, I think Doug Peterson's a great coach as well. And let me know your thoughts on this actually as well. Is Doug Peterson better than Ron Rivera? Me and my friend were debating it. Well, we were debating how good Ron Rivera really is, but is Doug Peterson better than he was? But the Jags, they did lose Calvin Ridley, but their draft was solid too to make up for some of the holes they lost in the offseason. And I just think that they're going to be a solid team, good team this year, and that they should make the playoffs. I wouldn't count the Jets out. I just don't think they're quite the same tier as the Jags or Bengals. But I'll put them up there because I think if I don't, I think that they're just not as likely as these other teams. But you get Aaron Rodgers back. And their receiver core still looks solid with Garrett Wilson and stuff. The defense is still good, except they lost. They had actually traded one of their best run stoppers on the D line to the Broncos in the draft, John Franklin Myers. But I think that they're still going to be a good team this year. Now, moving on to the Panthers, I think it's possible, just not likely, that they make the playoffs. I just really don't see it happening, honestly. I think that the Panthers, I think that Bryce Young will still develop into being a solid player. And I think with how good their O line looks, that the offense is actually going to be solid this year. I just think that the defense is going to be kind of horrendous. Obviously, they're hoping for J.C. Horn to put it together this year, and he's been solid when he's been on the field. But the linebacker core is pretty mediocre. I know they have Josie Jewell, and there's one other guy, I just can't think of his name right now. But I think that the Panthers, it's definitely possible. It's just not likely at all. Now, the Titans, I wouldn't count them out. I'm actually pretty high on the Titans this upcoming year. I think a lot of people are sleeping on Will Levis and stuff like that. But I just think that the Titans definitely did better than people thought. Obviously, some people are, flaming them for the Calvin Ridley signing, but they actually have a pretty solid receiver core. They've DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, and Traylon Burks, I believe, are their top three guys, unless there's someone else above Traylon Burks right now. Obviously, the running back room isn't as good now that they're missing Henry, but their O line is still solid. And honestly, I think that they're going to be a sleeper team this upcoming year. I do have a full video on them as well, but I just think that people are really sleeping on them. The defense might be a little questionable, but I still think it'll be solid. And obviously, having Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins sounds better when it's like 2020. But 4 years later, and they're still pretty solid. Now, the Saints, I just, the Saints are always a solid team. But it feels like for the past 4 years, they've just been super mediocre. So they're going to get the same tier as the Panthers. The Seahawks, honestly, I wouldn't count them out. But I think people are still too high on them. But let's try to, since we're narrowing it down, let's try to get some of the easy teams out the way. The Redskins, I don't think so. The Patriots, I don't think so. I just think that even with the rookie QBs, there's still a chance that they let an older guy play right now. and I just don't think that it's going to be super easy for those teams to make the playoffs. I think it's definitely not for them. The Colts were actually solid last year, and with Anthony Richardson, I wouldn't count them out at all. But I just think that I don't think that they're super likely. I know a lot of people are predicting them to make it, and I think out of the AFC South, even though I'm also high on the Titans, they might be the most likely to finish last just because of how good the division is in general. But the Raiders, I think it's possible, just not very likely that they do it. I think that, they're still going in with just some average quarterbacks this year. Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. But the Vikings, I wouldn't say they're going to make it. And now let's try to spread the list out a little bit more. If I had to move a couple teams down, I'd move the Giants down, the Panthers down. I'd probably even slide the Pats and Commanders into the bottom tier. And I think that this is probably the right list here of who's not going to make the playoffs, that didn't make it last year, and who actually has a chance to this year. Thank you guys for watching. I know this was a little bit of a yap session and just me, you know, talking about the teams. This was just an off in my head video, and I just thought it'd be interesting. Maybe closer to the season, I'll do a more in depth video on just a couple of these teams. But thank you all for watching. Have a good day.